The old town of Ravenshade was known for its secrets. Hidden behind the towering pines and shrouded in an almost perpetual mist, it was a place where whispers carried warnings, and shadows moved when no one was looking. The people who lived there understood that some things were better left buried. But when Evelyn Blackwood arrived, visibly pregnant and alone, those whispers turned into fearful murmurs. Evelyn was a mystery. No one knew where she had come from, and she offered no explanation. She rented a small, decaying cottage at the edge of town, one that had been abandoned for years. The villagers thought it cursed. The land itself seemed to hum with an unnatural presence. They avoided her, but she didn't seem to mind. She kept to herself, never venturing into town except for the occasional visit to the apothecary. Even then, her presence made the shopkeeper's hands tremble as he wrapped her items. What unsettled them most wasn't her isolation, but her pregnancy. Her stomach, though swollen with life, seemed unnatural. At times, it moved too violently, as if whatever was inside her was struggling against its confinement. The town midwife, a woman named Agnes, had dared to ask when she was due, but Evelyn had only smiled, a smile too wide, too knowing. "Soon," she whispered, her voice a hollow echo. Evelyn had always known she was different. From childhood, she had been haunted by visions, of dark figures standing at the foot of her bed, of whispers curling into her ears like tendrils of smoke. She had been told to ignore them, that they were mere nightmares, but deep down, she knew better. The father of her unborn child was a secret she would take to the grave. He had come to her in the woods, on a night when the moon was veiled by thick storm clouds. His presence had been overwhelming, his voice a melodic horror that coiled around her like an embrace. She hadn't seen his face, but she had felt his touch, an icy caress that burned deep into her soul. Now, as she stood before the tarnished mirror in her candlelit room, she watched in horror as something moved beneath her skin. Not a mere kick, but a shift, as though tiny fingers traced the inside of her stomach. She pressed a trembling hand against it, and for a moment, the movement stopped. Then, a sharp pain shot through her, forcing her to her knees. A scream built in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. In the center of the room, her hands clutching her stomach, her breath ragged that night, the air in Ravenshade grew heavier, thick with an unseen force. The town's dogs whimpered, retreating into their homes, their ears pinned back. Even the wind, which usually howled through the trees, fell silent, as if holding its breath. And in the shadows of Evelyn's room, something watched. The first sign of trouble came at midnight. Agnes, the midwife, awoke to a rhythmic tapping at her window. She hesitated before peering through the glass, but there was nothing there. Just as she turned back to her bed, a whisper brushed against her ear, a single word that chilled her to the bone. "Come." She felt an invisible force tug at her, compelling her forward. Dressing quickly, she grabbed her medical bag and hurried towards Evelyn's cottage. The moment she stepped inside, she knew something was terribly wrong. Candles flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of iron, and Evelyn sat. Sweat glistened on her forehead, but her eyes burned with something unnatural. "It's coming," she gasped, her voice raw with pain. Agnes hesitated. She had helped deliver dozens of children in her lifetime, but never had she felt such an overwhelming sense of dread. She knelt beside Evelyn, placing a hand on her stomach, and recoiled instantly. The thing inside wasn't just alive, it was aware. It pressed against her palm, its tiny fingers stretching, clawing at her skin. Agnes yanked her hand away, suppressing a scream. This is not right," she stammered. "We need a priest. We need—" Evelyn grabbed her wrist with a strength unnatural for a woman in labor. Her nails dug into Agnes's flesh, drawing blood. "No," she hissed. "No priests, no prayers. You have to help me. Now." Outside, the wind picked up, howling like a chorus of the damned. The candle flames twisted, elongating unnaturally, their shapes resembling screaming faces. The walls of the cottage groaned, as if something massive pressed against them from the outside. Agnes swallowed hard. There was no turning back. She had to deliver this child, whatever it was. The last of Ravenshade's resistance fell silent in the wake of Evelyn's child. The town, once a place of whispered fears, now pulsed with a heartbeat that did not belong to the living. The mist had become permanent, thick as oil, swallowing the light and muting the screams that still echoed through empty streets. Evelyn stood at the peak of the old church's bell tower, her child cradled in her arms. Its eyes, voids of endless night, stared into hers with something beyond recognition. Hunger, power, promise. Below, the remaining townsfolk huddled in their homes, their doors barred and prayers whispered. But no god could hear them now. The last priest had fallen, his body mangled and twisted in ways no human could endure. Then came the whispers. They slithered through the air, curling into ears, embedding themselves deep into the minds of those who still resisted. One by one, they stepped out of their homes, their eyes vacant, their movements slow and unnatural. They gathered beneath the bell tower, their lips moving in unison with words not their own. Evelyn smiled. Her child cooed, and with that sound, the last of humanity in Ravenshade was stripped away. Flesh melted, bones twisted, and the figures in the mist became something else. Things without form, without purpose, only servitude to the one now born into the world. The bell tolled, once, twice, a final time. And with that, the town of Ravenshade ceased to exist. The world shuddered. Far beyond the ruined village, in cities yet untouched, the first tendrils of darkness slithered through cracks in reality. The birth of something greater had only just begun.